Okay, it looks like Liturgy released their new album this past weekend. Let's talk about some other avant-garde metal that came out this month while I'm still processing that. I have always had a kind of mixed relationship with avant-garde metal, kind of in general. While I do appreciate how a lot of artists tag under that style tend to be very freely explorative with the way that they blend together lots of different interesting genres and sounds and unconventional ideas that you wouldn't normally find in plenty of other styles of music. It can definitely get to a point where it can maybe be taken a bit too far, to the point where it feels like it's almost like relying too heavily on being unconventional and original and less on making music that I can genuinely connect with. For example, as much as I do really appreciate bands like Imperial Triumphant or Gorguts or the aforementioned Liturgy, I can't really listen to their music regularly at all because it's so difficult and strange and inherently unattractive. I get that's the point of bands like those, but at the same time, I also listen to music to be entertained. That being said, there are plenty of other bands who are able to be highly imaginative, original, and just wildly inventive while also making music that is genuinely enjoyable, at least for me. And recent examples of this that released this past month are the latest records from Toumai and Entropia. Let's start with Entropia, which released on the 1st of March, which I totally didn't know about until someone recommended it to me on a Discord channel that I'm on. Toumai is a really cool French progressive avant-garde metal band that seems to blend together a lot of the weird genre-bending, chaotic mannerisms of bands like Between the Buried and Me and the Dillinger Escape Plan and the Callous Dow Boys, with the kind of theatrical nature of bands like the Diablo Swing Orchestra or Psy, while still also maintaining a personality of their own. Something that I think feels pretty distinctive and recognizable about this band's sound is their usage of piano. I love the almost Latin jazz and kind of salsa flavor of the piano work. Gives things an extra spice and extra flair that I think really works for them, and all of that is felt very prominently on their latest record in question, Tempus Fugit or something. I don't know how to pronounce that. Walk It Up Normal starts things off on a very interesting, very angular, rhythmic sounding note with lots of cool 10, 16 grooves that is accented by the aforementioned piano, along with some very weird, flamboyant singing that almost at times kind of reminds me of Justin Bonnet's from Tala. And the song goes in many different interesting directions, filled with weird tempo changes and unpredictable switch-ups that keep you gripped and engaged and wondering what is around the corner, before plenty of other songs that come after, including track 2, literally titled Porno Cats, continues this weird, crazy train of sorts. And from start to finish, this album is just an awesome collection of pretty much all of that. And I feel like diving into all of the different nuances and details and switch-ups that every single track displays, I think would be unnecessary. I think would make this video unnecessarily long. So I'll definitely leave a good amount for the listener to check out on their own. I will say probably my favorite song on the record, however, is Cold Carnival, which which really emphasizes the kind of Disney villain flavor that the whole record generally has. But I feel like that vibe is especially felt on there. We have some weird ragtimey grooves and sounds, as well as very hyperactive, strange theatrical vocals that are slightly menacing in nature while also being really fun. Very much giving this track a, evil circus vibe that I do think is really entertaining. I will say though, the closing title track, Tempus Fugit, while still a really cool song that showcases lots of cool, interesting ideas and sounds that, all the other songs display equally well, I don't know if it feels like that impressive of a closer, I guess, at least not in the context of the rest of the album. I mean, sure, the song does lead up to somewhat of a finale, but it doesn't really feel like that powerful or conclusive for it to justify being the way that it ends the whole record, at least not in my opinion. Still, if you're looking for some really cool, weird, wacky, Between the Buried and Me meets the Dillinger Escape Plan meets the Diablo Swing Orchestra, avant-garde, mathcore, metalcore chaos, this is definitely something that I would highly recommend checking out, especially since the band is super underrated. Like, they only have about like 150 monthly listeners on Spotify. Like, come on, guys, give this band some more love. They fucking need it, man. Speaking of interesting, obscure avant-garde bands that need more love, excuse me. Let's talk about the latest record from Entropia, titled Total. Entropia is a band, unlike Toumai, seems to have somewhat of an audience that has been anticipating this release. For they have released other relatively critically acclaimed albums in the past that I have yet to go back to, but also they did actually help to contribute to the Cyberpunk 2077 soundtrack. This album, regardless, was still my first dive into their sound, and needless to say, I was very surprised and impressed by what I heard. Now, unlike Toumai as well, this one is a bit less chaotic, a bit less flamboyant, and a bit more moody and meditative and immersive and atmospheric, and in very similar ways that you would expect from bands like Deafheaven or Lantlos or whatnot, very much taking on a post, atmospheric black metal or Blackgaze type of sound. But that style is pretty saturated with lots of other bands that are doing essentially pretty much the same thing. I mean, obviously, some are still doing it well enough to make their music interesting. But I think, regardless, I do sometimes find myself kind of craving something a little bit fresh and exciting and adventurous within the sound. And that is something that I think Entropia really deliver on here. For there are lots of weird angular rhythms and passages and strange, spacey, kind of psychedelic keyboards that I think really help to give things a very off-kilter, yet still very moody and immersive atmosphere. It's almost like what would happen if, like, Deafheaven collided with Cynic or something. That's kind of the vibe that I'm getting, although that's still probably not entirely accurate because of this band's very unconventional and genre-bending nature that doesn't really feel like it warrants, any sort of specific pigeonholing or anything like that. The opening track, Retox, starts the album on a very interesting, unpredictable, and rhythmically strange riff that well, I mean, if you like that riff, I mean, you better like it, like, because it repeats a lot throughout the song. It very much is the heart of the track. It very much carries the entire thing for its whole 7.5 minute runtime or so. While the band are very good at crafting interesting enough riffs that I think don't feel too bothersome when repeated this many times, I think they still do a really cool job at slowly developing their songs by introducing interesting different soundscapes or maybe adding some extra layers of melodies or other interesting weird spacey keyboards or something like that. And it all like really fits together to create a very distinctive sound that I just found myself really getting hypnotized by, just really getting lost in. The song Mania is another brilliant example of what I mean, which carries on the momentum of Retox, this time in a more slow tempo that gives it a kind of darker and more introspective flavor. The track Orbit is a very interesting number as well, for it begins pretty much what you would expect with these very shimmering post-rock and post-metal guitars that slowly build to something that's a bit more, traditionally metal. But as the track goes on, it gets progressively weirder, more chromatic, and more menacing. For especially towards the track's second half, the band slowly seemed to ease into these very strange chromatic riffs. Well, I don't necessarily find this to be as pleasant as, like, earlier moments on this track. The way that the band kind of slowly eased the listener into this, I think, makes it a very fascinating and strange journey. Then we get to the 15-minute doozy of a title track, which is filled with really interesting different sections and movements that keep you interested throughout, even if it may arguably be a bit excessive in its length. Regardless, I still found myself thoroughly captivated and hypnotized by everything going on. Towards the middle, the band do something really interesting where they constantly jump back and forth between these different tempo changes in a kind of zigzag kind of manner. But that repetition in itself, although what they're repeating is still really weird, I think the way that they do repeat this kind of strange idea uh, makes it so that I eventually become used to it and eventually kind of get lost in its repetition. It's like they know how to take such weird ideas and make them hypnotizing. And the track then leads up to a very powerful, expansive, almost kind of doom metal-esque finale that I found very rewarding and satisfying. The album's closer, very fittingly named Final, is a bit more of a straightforward cut, at least in terms of the standards of Entropia, at least that they show on this album. For it is a bit more of a straightforward, linearly structured post-metal song. Still with lots of cool, weird sounds and shit that still very much characterize the band's sound, but still a more linear post-rock crescendo regardless. But I think it very much works as a very fitting and relatively accessible way to end the whole thing. And yeah, this is just a really cool, fascinating album. While maybe not every idea that they throw in is entirely my thing, the band still have a lot of confidence in the way that they repeat these ideas and use them and develop them in really seamless ways that every decision that they use on here feels justified and feels purposeful and meaningful, to the point where I find myself thoroughly impressed and engaged by pretty much everything that's on here. On top of that, the production and the vocals are really great as well. The vocals weirdly feel very similar, actually, a lot of the time to Colin Eekhout from Amon-Ra. Like, I almost found myself kind of second guessing whether or not I was listening to him. Not to say that he just sounds like he's doing an impression of Colin or anything like that, but he very much has that emotive, tortured feel to his vocals that I think definitely adds a sense of emotion a good amount of the time to the band's music. And so, yeah, those are two really cool, weird, underrated avant-garde metal albums that I think are able to be experimental and strange without giving me a headache. And if you're looking for something that is adventurous and weird, give those albums a try if you haven't already. Yeah, I don't think it will. You will definitely, at the very least, most likely appreciate them for what they are. And so, yeah, those are my thoughts on these two records. Have you given either of them a listen? If so, what did you think of them? Please feel free to discuss your thoughts on them in the comments down below. And as always, please feel free to like and subscribe and comment and all that good stuff. And I will see you guys next time. Bye bye, paisanos.